The executive assistant's voice cut through the pristine silence of the 52nd floor. "Stop! You can't go in there!" But the small figure didn't stop. A 9-year-old girl in a cleaning uniform 3 sizes too big pushed past the mahogany doors, her mother's supplies clanging against a metal bucket that scraped the marble floor. She walked straight to the center of the office, past the leather chairs, past the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, and stopped in front of the massive desk where Dominic Reynolds sat, surrounded by merger documents worth $500 million. She looked up, her dark eyes fearless, and said the words that would shatter his entire morning. "My mom is sick, so I came instead." The office froze. Dominic's pen stopped mid-signature. His assistant stood paralyzed in the doorway. Security had already been called, their footsteps echoing in the hallway, but the little girl didn't flinch. She reached into the oversized pocket of her uniform, pulled out a crumpled piece of paper, and held it up with hands that trembled just slightly. "Please don't fire my mom," she said, her voice steady despite the fear buried beneath. "I can clean." Dominic Reynolds stared at her. In 15 years at Hamilton Industries, nothing like this had ever happened. His corner office was untouchable, sacred, a fortress of efficiency and control. He was known for making decisions in seconds, for cutting losses without hesitation, for building an empire on the principle that rules applied to everyone, no exceptions. But this child, standing in front of him in a uniform that swallowed her small frame, her dark hair pulled into 2 braids that looked like they'd been redone a dozen times, a cleaning badge pinned crooked on her chest. This child had walked through every barrier like they didn't exist. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice colder than he intended. "Sophie Martinez," she replied, lifting her chin. Her eyes, brown and sharp, showed an intelligence that didn't belong to someone so young. "My mom is Rosa Martinez. She cleans this building. She's been cleaning it for 8 years. She's never missed a day, not once, not even when she was sick before. But today she can't come. She has pneumonia. She can barely breathe. But she made me promise. She made me swear I'd come do her work, because she can't lose this job. We already lost our apartment. We're living in a motel. My little brother, he's 4, he's with the neighbor, and someone has to do the work. So I came." Dominic's jaw tightened. His assistant, Margaret, stepped forward, her voice low and urgent. "Mr. Reynolds, security is outside. Should I?" But Dominic raised a hand, silencing her. He looked at Sophie, really looked at her. The sleeves of her uniform were rolled up so many times they bunched at her elbows. Her shoes, worn sneakers, were too small, the laces frayed. But her posture was defiant, protective, fierce. She wasn't begging. She was negotiating. "You studied your mother's routine," he said, more statement than question. Sophie nodded. "Every night when she comes home, she tells me what she did. 3rd floor bathrooms first, then the conference rooms, then the executive offices, then the lobby, left to right, top to bottom, don't forget the corners. I know it all, Mr. Reynolds. I can do it. I have to do it." Something shifted in Dominic's chest, something he hadn't felt in years, maybe decades. A memory, unwanted and sharp, of being Sophie's age, sitting in a hospital waiting room, watching his own mother try to stand after a double shift, watching her legs give out, watching her pretend she was fine. His mother had worked 3 jobs. She died when he was 12, her body worn down to nothing, and he'd sworn he'd never let that kind of exhaustion touch his life again. He'd built Hamilton Industries on efficiency, on results, on the belief that business couldn't be sentimental. But this child was staring at him with the same eyes his mother had once had, determined, exhausted, unbreakable. Margaret's voice came again, quieter this time. "Sir, what do you want me to tell security?" Dominic didn't answer immediately. He leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled, his mind calculating a dozen outcomes. He could call security, have Sophie escorted out, fire Rosa for policy violation. It would be clean, efficient, exactly what his board would expect. But then Sophie shifted her weight, and the bucket clanged again, and he saw her wince, saw the strain in her small shoulders from carrying something far too heavy. He made a decision that defied every rule he'd ever written. "Show me," he said. Sophie blinked, confusion flickering across her face. "What?" "Show me," Dominic repeated, standing. "You say you can do your mother's job. Prove it." Before we continue, if stories of courage and compassion move you, subscribe to Love is Kindness. Now, tell us, what would you do if you were in Dominic's position? Comment below and let us know where you're watching from. Margaret's mouth opened, then closed. "Cancel my morning meetings," Dominic said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "All of them." Margaret stared at him like he'd lost his mind. "Sir, the board is expecting—" "I don't care what the board is expecting," Dominic interrupted. "Cancel them." Sophie's eyes widened, surprise replacing the defiance for just a moment, but she nodded, her small hands gripping the bucket handle tighter. Dominic stepped out from behind his desk, his perfectly tailored suit a stark contrast to her oversized uniform. "Lead the way," he said. Sophie dragged the supplies toward the executive bathroom, the bucket scraping against the polished floor, leaving faint wet streaks in its wake. It was too heavy for her. Anyone could see that, but she didn't ask for help. She pulled it inch by inch, her shoulders straining, her breath coming faster. Dominic followed, arms crossed, his expression unreadable, a mask he'd perfected over years of high-stakes negotiations. But inside, something unfamiliar stirred, something he'd buried a long time ago. The executive bathroom gleamed under fluorescent lights, all chrome and marble, spotless because Rosa Martinez cleaned it every single morning at 5 a.m. Sophie set down her supplies, pulled out a spray bottle nearly as big as her torso, and started scrubbing the sinks. She stood on her tiptoes, her small frame barely reaching the faucet, her arms moving in determined circles. Left to right, she whispered to herself, her voice so quiet Dominic almost didn't hear it. "Don't forget the corners, like Mama taught me." Her technique was clumsy. She missed spots, left streaks where there shouldn't be any, used too much cleaner in some places and not enough in others. But her effort was undeniable. She scrubbed like her life depended on it, because in a way, it did. Dominic watched in silence, his jaw tight, his mind calculating something he couldn't quite name. This child shouldn't be here. She should be in school, playing with friends, worrying about homework, not standing on tiptoes trying to save her mother's job. The conference room was next. Sophie pushed open the heavy double doors and stepped inside, her eyes scanning the 40-foot table that dominated the space. She pulled out a cloth, dipped it in solution, and started wiping, her small hands moving methodically across the polished wood, slowly, carefully, like every inch mattered. Halfway down the table, she found something, a family photo, left behind by someone careless. She picked it up gently, studied it for a moment, a man, a woman, two children smiling at the camera, and set it carefully aside, making sure it wouldn't get wet. Dominic noticed. She treated people's belongings with respect, even when those people would never know, even when no one was watching. It was the kind of integrity you couldn't teach, the kind that came from somewhere deeper. The door swung open. One of the executives, Thomas Bradford, walked in mid-phone call, saw Sophie, and stopped. "What the hell is a kid doing in here?" he snapped, his voice sharp with irritation. Dominic turned, his gaze cold as winter. "She's working," he said, his tone cutting through the air like a blade. "Are you?" Thomas's face went red, but he didn't respond. He left, the door clicking shut behind him. By the time they reached the lobby, Sophie was exhausted. Her braids had come loose, strands of dark hair sticking to her forehead. Her hands were red from chemicals and scrubbing. But she kept going, dragging the bucket toward the center of the marble floor, determined to finish what she started. She tried to lift the bucket to pour fresh water, but it was too heavy, far too heavy. Her arms shook. The bucket tipped. Water spilled everywhere, spreading across the pristine marble in a dark, accusing puddle. Sophie froze. The tears she'd been holding back all morning finally broke through, spilling down her cheeks in silent streams. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I'm so sorry. Please don't fire my mom." She dropped to her knees, her small hands frantically trying to push the water back into the bucket, trying to fix the unfixable, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Dominic didn't think. He just moved. He knelt down beside her, his $5,000 suit touching the wet floor without hesitation, and pulled a handkerchief from his pocket. "Here," he said gently, handing it to her. Sophie looked up at him, her eyes wide, disbelieving, like she couldn't understand why this man, this powerful, untouchable man, was kneeling beside her. "How old are you, Sophie?" he asked softly. "9, sir," she whispered. "When I was 9, Dominic said, his voice quieter than it had been all morning. "My mother cleaned offices too. She worked 3 jobs. She never stopped working. She died when I was 12. Sophie stared at him, and for the first time, she saw something human in his eyes, something raw and real and broken. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. They sat there on the lobby floor together, security watching from a distance in stunned disbelief. 2 people separated by wealth and power and age, connected by something deeper. "Tell me about your mother," Dominic said. Sophie wiped her eyes with his handkerchief, her voice shaky but gaining strength. "She's the best worker here. She never complains, not even when people leave messes on purpose, not even when they treat her like she's invisible. She works double shifts to pay for my little brother's asthma medication. He needs it every day, and it's expensive. She tells me all the time, honest work is dignified work. It doesn't matter what you do, as long as you do it well. She dreams about me going to college someday, even though we can barely afford food." Dominic listened, really listened. Not the way he listened in board meetings, calculating his next move, but the way you listen when something matters. Margaret appeared at the edge of the lobby, her phone in hand, her expression urgent. "Mr. Reynolds, the board is calling." "It's urgent." Dominic didn't look away from Sophie. "Nothing is more urgent than this," he said. Sophie tilted her head, studying him with those sharp, too old eyes. "Mr. Reynolds, sir," she asked carefully, "why is everyone here so sad?" Dominic blinked. "What do you mean?" "Everyone walks with their heads down," Sophie said. "I've been watching them all morning. They don't smile. They don't talk to each other unless they have to. My mom says, when you love your work, you walk tall. But no one here walks tall." The words hit him like a freight train. He looked around the lobby, at the employees passing through, heads bent over phones, shoulders hunched, faces blank. She was right. They were miserable. He'd built an empire on efficiency, on results, on numbers that climbed higher every quarter. But he'd forgotten the people behind those numbers. He'd built a machine, not a company. And this 9-year-old girl, in her oversized uniform and worn sneakers, had seen it in a single morning. The board meeting was set to begin at 11. $500 million hung in the balance, a merger that would position Hamilton Industries as the dominant force in their sector. Dominic walked into the conference room with Sophie Martinez at his side. The board members, 12 men and women in expensive suits, looked up from their tablets and folders, their expressions shifting from confusion to disbelief to outrage in the span of seconds. "Dominic, what is this?" one of them asked, his voice tight. "This is inappropriate." Dominic pulled out a chair for Sophie, his movements deliberate, controlled. "This child," he said, his voice cutting through the rising murmurs, "worked harder this morning than most of you do all week. Sit down." The room went silent. Sophie climbed into the oversized leather chair, her feet dangling above the floor, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Dominic handed her a stack of blank paper and a box of colored pencils from the credenza. "You can draw while we talk," he said quietly. Sophie nodded, her eyes grateful, and pulled the paper closer. The presentation began. Charts appeared on the screen, profit projections, market share analysis, efficiency metrics. The numbers were staggering, undeniable. The merger would make them billions, but it would also cut 3,000 jobs, streamline operations, Eliminate redundancies. The word redundancies hung in the air like smoke. Dominic watched the slides, his jaw tight, his mind somewhere else. Somewhere on a lobby floor, kneeling beside a 9-year-old girl who'd asked him why everyone looked so sad. Sophie drew quietly in the corner, her pencil moving in careful strokes across the paper. She didn't understand the words being thrown around the room. Synergy, vertical integration, asset optimization. But she understood people. She always had. Her picture took shape slowly, people standing together, holding hands, smiling. Not the fake smiles she'd seen in the lobby that morning, but real ones, the kind her mother wore when she talked about Sophie's future. Richard Chen, 55, silver-haired, Dominic's harshest critic and the board member most likely to challenge every decision, leaned back in his chair and glanced at Sophie. His own daughter was her age, 9, with the same serious eyes and careful hands. He watched Sophie color for a long moment, then stood and walked over to her. "What are you drawing?" he asked, his voice softer than it had been all meeting. Sophie looked up, startled, then smiled shyly. "What this place could be," she said. "My mom says, even sad places can become happy. You just have to care enough to change them." Richard stared at the drawing, at the people holding hands, at the smiles. He turned to Dominic, something unreadable in his expression. "When did we forget why we started this company?" he asked quietly. The room shifted. Dominic felt it. A crack in the foundation he'd built, a question he'd been avoiding for years. "We started this to build something," Richard continued, his voice gaining strength. "To create jobs, to give people opportunities, to matter. And now we're cutting 3,000 of those people so our stock price can climb another few points." When did that become enough? Dominic looked at Sophie. She'd gone back to her drawing, adding details, trees, a sun, windows in the buildings where you could see people inside, working, together. She had no idea what the merger meant. No idea that her mother's job, along with thousands of others, was on the chopping block in the name of efficiency. But her presence made it impossible to ignore. Impossible to pretend that those 3,000 jobs were just numbers on a spreadsheet. He stood abruptly. "I need to make a call," he said. The board members exchanged glances, confused, but Dominic was already walking toward the door, his phone in his hand. He dialed the hospital where Margaret had told him Rosa Martinez had been admitted that morning. The line rang twice before a nurse answered. "I'm calling about Rosa Martinez," Dominic said, his voice clipped. "Is she still there?" There was a pause, the sound of typing. "Sir, she checked herself out an hour ago, against medical advice. We tried to stop her, but she insisted, said she had to get to work." Dominic's blood went cold. "She what?" "She left, sir. She could barely walk, but she left." Dominic hung up, his mind racing. Sophie, who'd been watching him from the conference room doorway, her drawing clutched in her small hands, went pale. "She left," Sophie whispered, her voice shaking. "I told her to stay in bed. I told her I could do it. Why didn't she listen?" "Because she's terrified," Dominic said, the truth landing heavy between them. "She's terrified of losing everything." Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "We have to find her." Dominic nodded, already moving. "Margaret, cancel the rest of the meeting. We're leaving, now." Margaret opened her mouth to protest, saw the look on his face, and closed it. "Yes, sir." Dominic's driver took the turns through Manhattan like a man possessed, the black sedan weaving through traffic, horn blaring, tires squealing. Dominic sat in the back seat. Sophie beside him, her hand gripping his so tightly her knuckles had gone white. "She's going to be okay," Dominic said, but even he didn't believe it. Sophie stared out the window, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. "She can't breathe right," she whispered. "She was coughing so much last night. She couldn't even stand up without holding on to something. I thought if I came and did her work, she'd rest. I thought I could fix it." Dominic looked at her. This tiny, fierce child who'd been carrying adult-sized fear all day, who'd walked into his office like she could shoulder the weight of the world if it meant saving her mother. "You did everything right, Sophie," he said quietly. "You were so brave. But some things are too big for one person to carry alone." Sophie looked up at him, tears streaking down her face. "Even for grown-ups?" she asked. "Even for grown-ups," he confirmed. The motel appeared ahead, a run-down 2-story building with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign. The driver pulled into the parking lot, gravel crunching under the tires. Dominic scanned the lot, his heart pounding, and then he saw her, Rosa Martinez, in her cleaning uniform, pale as death, leaning against the side of the building, one hand pressed to the wall for support, the other clutching her chest as she coughed violently. She was trying to walk toward the bus stop, trying to get to work, her body barely holding her upright. Sophie screamed, "Mama!" She threw open the car door before it had fully stopped and ran, her small legs pumping as fast as they could. Rosa looked up, saw her daughter, saw Dominic stepping out of the car behind her, and terror flooded her face. "Please, Mr. Reynolds," she gasped, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm so sorry. Don't fire me. I'm coming to work right now. I just needed a minute. I promise I can." Her legs gave out. She collapsed onto the gravel, her body crumpling like paper. Sophie reached her first, dropping to her knees, her hands on her mother's face. "Mama, Mama, please, wake up." Dominic was there a second later, his arms lifting Rosa off the ground like she weighed nothing. "Call an ambulance," he barked at his driver. "Now." The ambulance took too long. Dominic didn't wait. He carried Rosa to his car, her body limp in his arms, Sophie running beside him, her small hand clutching her mother's sleeve like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to the earth. "Get in," Dominic said, his voice sharp with urgency. Sophie climbed into the back seat, and Dominic laid Rosa across the seat, her head in Sophie's lap. The driver didn't need to be told twice. He floored it. Sophie held her mother's hand, her fingers wrapped around Rosa's cold, trembling ones, tears streaming down her face in silent rivers. "Mama, please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please don't leave me. I need you." Rosa's eyes fluttered open for just a moment, unfocused, glazed with fever and exhaustion. She tried to speak, but all that came out was a weak cough. Sophie pressed her forehead to her mother's hand, her small body shaking with sobs she couldn't control anymore. Dominic sat in the front seat, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice a weapon. "This is Dominic Reynolds, CEO of Hamilton Industries. I'm bringing someone to your ER. She has severe pneumonia, possible respiratory failure. You will have a team waiting when I arrive. Or I will personally ensure your hospital loses every corporate contract it has. Do you understand me?" The voice on the other end stammered something affirmative. Dominic hung up. They pulled up to the emergency entrance 7 minutes later. The doors flew open, and a team of nurses and doctors rushed out with a gurney. Dominic lifted Rosa out of the car, placed her gently on the stretcher, and stepped back as they swarmed her, checking vitals, inserting IVs, shouting medical terms. Sophie didn't understand. One of the doctors glanced at Dominic. "You got her here just in time," he said, his voice grim. "Another hour, and this would have been critical. Maybe worse." Sophie stood frozen, watching them wheel her mother through the automatic doors, the fluorescent lights swallowing her whole. Dominic put a hand on her shoulder. "Come on," he said gently. "We'll wait inside." They walked into the waiting room, a sterile space with hard plastic chairs and the smell of disinfectant. Dominic sat down, and Sophie climbed into the chair beside him, her body so small it looked like the chair might swallow her too. Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky, casting long shadows through the windows. Sophie's eyes grew heavy, her head nodding forward, jerking back up, then nodding again. Eventually, exhaustion won. She leaned against Dominic's arm and fell asleep, her breathing soft and even. Dominic didn't move. He sat perfectly still, afraid that if he shifted even slightly, he'd wake her, and she needed this rest more than anything. His phone buzzed, again and again. Margaret's name flashed on the screen, followed by Richard Chen's, followed by 3 other board members. The merger, the meeting, the $500 million hanging in limbo. Dominic looked down at Sophie, her small hand still clutching his sleeve even in sleep, and turned off his phone. A doctor appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand, exhaustion written in the lines around his eyes. "Family of Rosa Martinez," he called out. Dominic stood carefully, gently moving Sophie so she stayed asleep in the chair. He walked over, his heart pounding. "She's stable," the doctor said. "We've got her on oxygen and antibiotics. She's going to be okay, but she needs rest. Real rest. Weeks of it." Dominic exhaled, a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Can I see her?" Rosa looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, an oxygen mask over her face, IVs running into both arms. Her eyes were open, staring at the ceiling, and when Dominic walked in, they filled with tears. "My job," she whispered, her voice muffled by the mask. "Mr. Reynolds, my job. I'm so sorry. I'll make up the hours. I promise. I just need—" "Your job is safe," Dominic interrupted, pulling a chair beside her bed. "But we need to talk." Rosa stared at him, disbelief written across her face. Dominic leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his voice steady. "Your daughter walked into my office this morning," he said. "She was wearing your uniform. She told me you were sick, and she'd come to do your work. And then she did it, Rosa. She tried so hard. She scrubbed bathrooms, wiped down conference rooms, cleaned floors. She's 9 years old, and she was willing to work herself to exhaustion to save your job. Do you know what that taught me?" Rosa shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "It taught me that I built a company where people are so afraid of losing everything that a child feels like she has no choice but to sacrifice herself. And that's on me. That's my failure, not yours. Never yours." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I'm restructuring Hamilton Industries. Starting today, we're implementing benefits, health care, fair wages, and we're creating a scholarship fund for employees' children who want to go to college. The first recipient," he said, his voice softening, "is Sophie Martinez." Rosa's breath hitched, her hand flying to her mouth. "You can't," she whispered. "Mr. Reynolds, we can't accept." "Yes, you can," Dominic said firmly. "And you will, because your daughter deserves a future that doesn't involve cleaning up after people who don't see her. And because—" he hesitated, his voice cracking just slightly. "When I was 9, I watched my mother work herself to death, and I swore I'd never let that happen to anyone else. I broke that promise, but I'm keeping it now." Rosa sobbed, her shoulders shaking, her hands covering her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you." Dominic stood, started to leave, then stopped at the door. Sophie's voice, quiet and drowsy, came from behind him. "Told you honest work matters, Mama." He turned. Sophie stood in the doorway, her hair a mess, her eyes half closed with sleep, but a small smile on her face. Dominic smiled back, truly smiled, the kind of smile that reached his eyes, the kind he hadn't worn in years. He looked at Sophie, at Rosa, and realized something profound. His mother would have been proud of this moment, not of the empire he'd built, but of this, of choosing people over profit, of remembering what mattered. 6 months later, Sophie Martinez walked into Dominic Reynolds' office again, but this time, everything was different. She wore a crisp school uniform, navy blue and pressed, her backpack slung over one shoulder. In her hands, she carried a report card, straight A's across every subject. Rosa stood beside her, healthy now, her cheeks full of color, her smile bright and genuine. She wore a supervisor badge clipped to her shirt. Her new role overseeing Hamilton Industries' worker welfare program, the first of its kind in the company's history. Dominic stood from his desk, walked around it, and knelt down to Sophie's level. "Let me see that," he said, taking the report card. He studied it, his eyebrows raising in mock surprise. "All A's. I'm impressed." Sophie grinned, the kind of grin that showed missing teeth and pure pride. "Mama says education is the key to everything." Dominic handed the card back. "Your mama is right." Rosa placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder, her eyes meeting Dominic's. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything." Dominic shook his head. "Thank you, both of you." The foundation had launched 3 months earlier, named after Dominic's mother, the woman who'd worked 3 jobs and never lived to see the world change. The Reynolds Foundation provided health care, child care support, and education funding for service workers across the city. It started at Hamilton Industries, but it was spreading, other companies taking notice, other CEOs asking how they could do the same. Richard Chen, once Dominic's harshest critic, had become his strongest ally, pouring resources and influence into the cause. Together, they were rewriting the rules. The company culture had transformed. Employees walked taller now, their heads up, their voices heard. Break rooms buzzed with conversation instead of silence. People smiled at each other in hallways. Dominic noticed it every day, the shift from machine to community, from efficiency to humanity. It hadn't hurt the bottom line either. Productivity was up, turnover down, and the company's reputation had never been stronger. Turned out, when you treated people like they mattered, they gave you everything they had. On the wall behind Dominic's desk, framed in simple black wood, hung Sophie's drawing from that first day. People holding hands, smiling, working together. Beneath it, a small plaque read, "What this place could be." Dominic looked at it every morning when he arrived, and every evening before he left. It reminded him of what he'd almost lost, of what a 9-year-old girl had taught him in a single morning. Sometimes the smallest voice carries the most important message. Rosa still cleaned. But now she was building something too, training others, advocating for fair treatment, ensuring no one else would ever feel invisible again. And Sophie was going to change the world. Dominic knew it with the same certainty he knew the sun would rise. She had the courage, the intelligence, and something rarer, the heart. "You ready for your next challenge?" Dominic asked, pulling out a small wrapped box. Sophie's eyes lit up. "What is it? Open it and see." Sophie tore through the wrapping paper, pulled out a book, Advanced Mathematics for Young Minds. Her face split into a grin so wide it could have lit the entire office. "This is perfect," she breathed. Dominic smiled. "I know." They high-fived, the sound echoing in the quiet office, and Rosa watched, her hand over her heart, tears of pride shining in her eyes. This was what mattered. Not mergers or profit margins or market dominance. This, connection, growth, hope. If this story reminded you that one act of courage can change everything, subscribe to Love is Kindness for more stories that inspire the best in all of us. Now, we want to hear from you. What would you have done in Dominic's position? Comment below, let us know where you're watching from, and rate this story on a scale of 0 to 10. Did Sophie and Rosa's journey touch your heart? We'd love to know.